Alright, so good news, this one should be relatively short because there's not really much to talk about outside of like a couple of like mission critical stuff like the time travel. So what'll happen is I'll just do like the overview of the chapter, or like, the quick summary, and then when I hit one of the big things, I'll put like a timestamp for it. I guess that'll be fine. Okay, so starting off, right, chapter picks up and, everything still sucks, right? That's really it. The first third of the chapter, they're just talking about how bad everything is still. Finding food is bad, finding water is bad, shelter, hetero creatures, red tide is still bad. And then we hear that Agent Zero is also reforming, because as we know, Chaos's consciousness can't hold on forever because she was incomplete. The whole idea was just for her to hang on long enough for them to find a real solution, and she's finally hit the point where she can't hold on any longer, and that new Agent Zero starts to launch its counterattack on humanity. So there's actually not too many big things there, right? Luna dies during the fighting, Vanessa dies, sacrificing herself. Long story short, Agent Zero traps what's left of humanity inside Aerospace City. And then during that point, Commandant decides to try and see if he can seize control of the Red Tide from this newborn version of Agent Zero before they gain sanity and get the ball rolling and get stronger. So he jumps into the Red Tide and, lo and behold, Ishmael pulls him out. So this takes place a third of the way through the chapter. Before this point, Ishmael had showed up a couple of times, just in dreams or very brief appearances at the end of nodes, but she doesn't really do anything. So this is her first big appearance on screen. So she does a lot of exposition at this point. She clarifies exactly who she is. She's hi, I'm Ishmael. I want to know why you jumped off this bridge. I saved you a bunch of times. I helped you out. I'm also the merciful one. Sorry about that. And, just gives the little introduction that we need to her character because we knew literally nothing about her at this point in the story. So she also does a lot of explaining about what is exactly happening with humanity and the virus and this test that they have. So we learned that humanity's test isn't very fair, right? So they were supposed to be dealing with the punishing virus. That's not that bad. But the hetero tower wasn't supposed to be here yet. And the only reason it showed up early, which we found out it was early way back in Spiral of Chronos, but the reason the tower is early is because of Vonnegut and Dominic. Every single chapter, my hatred of Dominic is vindicated. I have never felt so seen. Yes, the Dominic hatred, I can feel it in my veins. But because of those two bozos, when they failed their chaos contamination test and they tried to run away into this world, they left the door open, and Agent Zero took that chance, walked through, and brought the tower with her. And that's why humanity at this point now has to deal with the punishing virus and the Red Tide hetero tower. Yeah, of course, she goes through and she explains to Commandant that, she's the gatekeeper of the tower, and she can give him the opportunity to go back in and take the test. Because him taking the test is completely independent from everything else. So after that, she beams him into the tower. He sees these projections of Grey Raven, which, yes, they are projections, right? They're just mental projections, right? It's essentially just weaponized schizophrenia. But no, Grey Raven is not actually there right now. So Commandant and his delusions fight their way through the tower, and they fight Ishmael the same way that Lee did. But instead of walking away this time, Commandant accepts the power, and he gains control over the hetero tower. Now, he immediately tries to fix the tower, but remember, the tower has no core, right? He and Lucia stole the core from the tower in Shapers, so there's no core in the tower. The tower is still extremely messed up from when he and Lucia left. So he says, I'll just leave the tower, get the core, come back, and everything will be fixed. But no, the whole struggle from the end of Shapers was that the collapse of the tower meant the exit was no longer pointing to where it should go, right? You can't really control it anymore. It's just kind of pointing in random directions. And he just got this power, so he for sure cannot control it well enough to know where he's going. So Ishmael tells him, essentially, you're stuck here, dude. You can't really leave. She's kind of an asshole for that, because she's like, well, technically, you're a member of humanity, and if Agent Zero doesn't eat you, then technically, humanity survives, even if humanity is just you. I'm like, come on now. You are an interdimensional, godlike being from another dimension. You knew what he meant by I want to save humanity. You knew exactly what he meant. She thought she was being cute with that one. Yeah, and then after that, she offers him some other, solutions to his problem. She's like, I can teach you how to preserve the civilization and, hide it away, store it away. Or you could become an observer with me, and we can go travel the universe together. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I would definitely take that deal. I'd be like, dude, the world is kind of buns, but you're telling me I can get a infinite power, immortality, and I get a hot pink-haired lady? Sign me up. But, Commandant has eyes for one. He is stuck on that Lucia train, so he turns her down, and she, begrudgingly tells him that there is another possibility to, fixing the problem. Not through the tower, but through his own nature. They made it clear before in the earlier chapters, you cannot use the tower to fix the tower, right? Because when you make a change to the outside, the tower does not change, right? The way time travel works with the hetero tower is that you're not going back in time. The tower creates another timeline, but it just carries on the changes that you made. But because Ishmael is now here and she agrees to help, she can travel back in time. And her time travel works the conventional way, right? The way you assume time travel works. One timeline, you go back and you change something, and then it changes the future, right? So we saw in her story that she's got whole other ways to time travel. Actually, I should put the timestamp right around here, because this is about to get really gross. Okay, so before they do any type of time traveling, Ishmael warns him about the possibility of him getting stuck in a time loop. I think that's worth mentioning, worth talking about. So you start off with Chaos being born, right, in 26. Originally being born in 26. She's incomplete Chaos. So that takes you into Shaper's Ripples, because Shaper's Ripples happens because Chaos is incomplete. Because the entirety of that chapter is them trying to delay killing Cradle because they need to wait for Chaos to gain her strength. So at the end of that chapter, Chaos gains Agent Zero anyway, loses control, and then you get to the galaxies. Commandant goes into Wither to Shine, and he ascends. Then he goes back in time, and then he dies and enters the Chaos Egg, right, to be reborn. That takes you back to Chaos being born. Now, if Commandant fails to take over Chaos, that will lead him back into Shaper's Ripples, and that will make the complete circle here. That'll make the complete circle, right? But instead of doing that, Commandant instead takes control of Chaos, and that leads him to become the true Chaos. He kills Cradle, and then, all the other stuff happens. And that's essentially how the circle goes. So, if he had failed to take over Chaos the second time, then he would have went back into the Shapers, and then that is what starts this entire circle. And that's the loop you get trapped in. And that's why it was so dangerous for him, because if he failed this one step, it was over for him. So, yeah, that's how the loop danger thing works. Okay, so now on to the actual time-traveling stuff. Ishmael takes the Commandant from 33, right, the Ascended Commandant, and she places his consciousness into the clone body from 26. And then she seals his memories, because they need the performance to be very convincing, right? They're trying to deceive godlike interdimensional creatures who are so powerful that even Ishmael is scared of them. So they need the performance to be A1. So she locks away his memories, and then he goes through all of chapter 26. At the end, he is absorbed into the Chaos Egg, and he comes out as the complete Chaos, right? Completely made Chaos. And because at this point in time, Commandant has this ascended level consciousness, Vonnegut's unable to control him in any way. Or he's unable to control Chaos. And Commandant's the one in control of Chaos. So, since Chaos is complete, Vonnegut doesn't have to do all of the, the BS from Shaper's Ripples, where they were trying to, not kill Cradle, wait for Chaos to mature. They can just go right into it. Actually, pause that. So I feel like someone's going to say, why didn't they have Commandant take over Chaos the first time and just skip all of the Shaper's Ripples stuff? The truth is, you can't skip the Shaper's Ripples portion for the first Commandant. There has to be at least one Commandant in the beginning who starts the Shaper's Ripples cycle. Otherwise, you can't get to the is Commandant in control. Because if Chaos does not fail to contain Agent Zero the first time, then Commandant never goes into the future. He never goes into the 30-year time skip, which means he never does Wither to Shine, which means he never goes back into the tower, so he never goes back in time to become Chaos again. That's why Chaos had to fail the first time. Because if you remove step 1, you can't get to the point where Chaos is reborn again. By the end of the chapter, Shaper Ripples never happened, so it doesn't matter. Like I said, speaking of Shapers, let's get back to that. So, Vonnegut enters the tower with this now complete Chaos. Because Commandant, his ascended consciousness is within the tower, he is able to pull himself to the surface of Chaos's consciousness and attach himself to the surface. So now he is the one essentially driving Chaos. So they're in the tower, they bum rush Cradle, and even though Chaos is more complete now, Cradle is still, a bit stronger, right? It still takes 2 of them. She's still not strong enough to 1v1, because Cradle has more experience, right? More experience fighting. She's been a hetero creature forever, whereas Commandant is just driving Chaos. She's got home field advantage because she is Agent Zero, and the tower is hers. She's got more experience using the Red Tide, so they're trying, right? They're trying, and she's weakened because she has no memories, which changes very quickly. So because Chaos contains the memory data of the Ascended Commandant who had already been through Shaper's Ripples, in Shaper's Ripples, Commandant saw the memories of Cradle. He saw the memories of Nemo and Trout. He saw what happened with Dominic and everything that happened in the Chaos timeline. And all of those memories are inside of Chaos. So unlike in Shapers, where Cradle very gradually got bits and pieces of memory over the course of the chapter, as soon as she lands a hit on Chaos, all of those memories that Commandant got from within the tower flow right into Cradle, and she gains back all her strength instantly. So now, of course, this really sucks for Vonnegut, because it's just him in Chaos. There is no Commandant and there is no Lucia in the tower right now, because Vonnegut didn't have to wait, right? Remember, it took months of issues inside the tower before Commandant and Lucia actually went in. This time, he didn't have to wait months. He went straight after Cradle. So they're not here. So during the fight, Vonnegut learns that Commandant is currently driving Chaos, and after learning that he must have came back from another layer of the tower from the future, the Nemo part of his consciousness takes over, and he's like, you know what, let's end this. He gives Chaos his key, and he comes up with the plan to stop Cradle for good. So, Vonnegut Nemo sacrifices himself, Chaos kills Cradle, she becomes the new Agent Zero, and now she has access to a complete hetero tower, but she's still unable to use it to change the past. Remember, every time you loop using the tower, you create a new layer. Vonnegut and Cradle were in there spamming, alright? Spamming like nobody's business. So now, the amount of information within the tower has increased dramatically. And what I mean by information is the hetero tower only has so much space. Now, it's a near infinite amount of space, but it's not an infinite amount of space. There is a limit to how much the hetero tower can store. So, while the amount of information within the hetero tower keeps increasing, the amount of space within the hetero tower is not. And it's so close to just falling apart and breaking that Chaos, even though she has this authority, can't really do anything about it because she's still new to using her power. So Ishmael shows up and she tells her, this is how it was always going to be, and the reason Ishmael never told her that this was going to fail is because Ishmael can't disobey the rules. The same way that, Commandant, when he was in the whale, couldn't say his whole, speech, she's also bound by those rules. So, Chaos decides, that sucks, I hate that, I'm gonna do this manually then, and she decides she's going to absorb all of the information herself. So all the information that's in the tower, Chaos is gonna take all of it. So then, the tower has less information, it's in less of a volatile state, and then she can use it to fix everything. So she proceeds to do that. She starts absorbing entire timelines worth of information. Not even just cities, planets, it's timelines worth of information. So she's going through what Liv was going through times infinity, right? Literally times infinity. So, she's going crazy throughout the tower. She ends up in front of Ishmael's door. She kind of just gets Ishmael's book somehow. She probably just gives it to her, but she starts reading Ishmael's life story, and we get Ishmael's background. We see she's from a civilization called the Four-Winged White Raven. They're really cool. They got time travel and stuff. They had their own version of the punishing virus, and Agent Zero, Ishmael tried to stop them. Eventually, she herself also gained the authority of the Punisher, which is their Agent Zero, and became an observer. I know that's vague, and it doesn't tell you anything, but that's how it is, in the chapter. They do not tell you how she got the authority. She just says that, oh yeah, I took the authority, and I became an observer. And then that's it. It ends right there. She explains nothing. Useless. So, at the end of her reading the story, Chaos decides to kick it into high gear, and Ishmael's like, okay, well, I don't need to watch this any longer. I know how this is going to end. But she sees a couple of timelines start disappearing. So she goes to see Nanami. Now, we saw that Nanami in To the Galaxies, she is able to actually close down timelines. Now, the first time we saw it was in a simulation, but at the very end of the chapter, Nanami crosses the gate, probably gets some crazy power up, and now she's able to Now she's able to close actual timelines. What's happening there is, you have infinite timelines, and Nanami is closing the ones that are irrelevant, right? Trying to remove some of the extra data. So, just really bad futures, Nanami's going through and just shutting those down, and then turning them into raw data. And Commandant, as Chaos, is taking in that data and using it to build a singular proper timeline. So it's Nanami makes the yarn, and Chaos is the one who's doing the actual knitting. Yeah, that's about close enough. And then Ishmael gives Nanami the shard that contains all of Rosa's research data from the Hetero Tower core, which is going to come into play a little bit later. After that, Ishmael is moved by humanity's perseverance, and they show her an actual new ending, and she's like, wow, I didn't know that was even possible. Alright, cool. So she decides to step in and help, even though she's going against the rules, in direct violation of the rules. So she kills Chaos. And that is the final step that she did. So because Chaos contains all of the excess information, killing Chaos removes that information, right? She deletes the file, right? Chaos is the file, she deletes it, all that data is now gone. But also, Chaos was just going crazy, because, she's got infinite timelines of like angry people data inside of her head, so she's losing her mind right now. Now, as for why she, afterwards she says she's gonna have to like pay some consequences. Now, keep in mind, her consequence is drastic enough to make her really sit there and consider if it's worth it. And all she did is at the very end, she beat up one character. So yeah, I feel like if she would have like stepped in earlier, then like they would have straight up just like physically manifested and just started putting belt to everyone. Alright, but yeah, almost over, almost done. So at the very end, after everything, Nanami becomes the new administrator Nanami. The timeline has now been corrected. There's now one singular timeline. And Nanami decides to do a switcheroo, right? The same thing that Commandant and Ishmael did, where they just switched one Commandant for another. Nanami switches one hetero shard for another. So instead of sending the original hetero shard, she sends back the one that has the hetero core data from Rosa. So now that'll give humanity a huge jump, because, you know, they were making some crazy stuff, like, you know, they made Hyper Lee with the regular hetero shard. Now they got hetero core data, so they're gonna make some crazy shit with that. So she sends that back in time, and most importantly is Commandant wakes up on Babylonia. Now you're probably like, okay, if Commandant was Chaos, how did that happen? Why is he back on Babylonia? So with the new timeline, right, it's a new timeline. In this timeline, Vonnegut never came to the world. Because Vonnegut never came to the world, the hetero tower never appeared. And because the hetero tower never appeared, there was never an Agent Zero, there was never a Shaper's Ripples, there was never a Wither to Shine, so Commandant never had to go back in time to become Chaos. That's what I mean. That's how Ishmael's time travel works. Because they changed this one event, none of the other events after it ever happened. So that's why Commandant ends up back on Babylonia as if nothing happened. Because in this new timeline, nothing is what happened. Nothing happened. Now, they say that, you know, he and Lucia and like no one is supposed to remember. He and Lucia kind of remember. They have like dreams of what happened. Okay, that's about it for the chapter. Fantastic ending. We absolutely love that. We are just about done with this video now. It's got a couple things to say about the chapter. So, I'll be honest with you. Out of the arc, right, 31 to 33, I think this one is the worst. I think this is the bottom. This might be the bottom. Now, the ending, right, of Commandant finally reuniting with Grey Raven, that's pure peak. Pure peak, okay? I love that. I've been waiting for that for months. However, when compared to the other chapters, right, because I judge the chapters based on what they're supposed to be, right? So I judge Shaper's Ripples as an opening chapter, and like I judge Wither to Shine as a closing chapter. And as a closing chapter, I think there's a lot of like wasted space and like wasted plot points. So like starting off, the first third of the chapter doesn't really need to be there. I get that it's trying to tell us how bad everything is, but like we know how bad everything is. That was the point of To the Galaxies. It was going through and showing us exactly how bad everything got over the course of these 30 years. So I don't need you to tell me, oh, things are still bad right now. And then you have them introducing new Agent Zero. I can understand them saying that because, you know, they did say Agent Zero would be reborn through chaos, so I get that. But I don't think they needed to give that Agent Zero so much screen time, considering it doesn't really do anything. Kind of shows up for a bit, throws some hetero creatures. I mean, Vanessa detonates herself to try and like stall. If you replace that Agent Zero with just like a big horde of hetero creatures, nothing really changes, right? Even if you did that for, I know Luna also sacrifices herself, but like same thing, if you switch out Agent Zero for like anything else in that scenario, everything works exactly the same. It just felt like, you know, a lot of chapter space to dedicate to something that wouldn't exist at the end of the chapter. Here's something that I thought I was going to dislike, but I actually didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would. Ishmael feels like such a plot device But at the same time, that is what she is. She is a plot device, right? That's what she's meant to be. Because she's not here on Earth for any like major reason. She's just here for entertainment, right? She is literally just here because. And then while she was here, she's like, oh man, that's actually really, really cool. I guess I'll help you out. And I guess when you are a infinitely long-lived, immortal space god, I guess I can see you doing something like this for entertainment. So I actually am not going to hold that against the chapter. But yeah, you know what? That first part of the chapter definitely holds back so much. It's so much wasted space. It was such a drag reading through. Vanessa's sacrifice was crazy. The comeback on Vanessa's character is insane. Went from hate you to do I hate you to do I like you to oh no, I really like you. Her PR needs to be studied because that comeback was insane. But yeah, thinking about it, yeah, definitely goes Shaper's Ripples to the Galaxies, and then like maybe like a half step below, I'll put Wither to Shine. I didn't really cut very much. The first node, that's really it. Just the first node, because they were just walking through some snowfields. I cut that. The story stages were also super, super cool. I liked being able to like redo some of like the old chapters. It's really just the old version of Cradle Parade. But it was cool being able to like choose other paths, right? Kind of shows how Ishmael sees all these different possible endings. It was nice to see that like represented. But I really like at the end. Chaos was a really fun boss fight. I really liked Chaos. I was having a tough time like waiting for a boss that I liked more than Cradle from 29. I think I finally found it. Chaos might be the one. That's crazy. It took a hetero creature to beat another hetero creature boss. I also really like the detail of how Chaos pulls out Lucia's sword. Even when you're a hetero creature, can't get Lucia off the brain. Music, fantastic. I think my opinion on the music is the same as my opinion on the chapter rankings. Interstice Oath and then Gathering Eternities is like neck and neck with each other, but I think Interstice Oath might be a little bit higher. And then like another step below them is Last Witness. It was good, don't get me wrong. It kind of felt like all the parts of the song were the same, but just had slightly different tempos. But yes, still overall, absolutely fantastic chapter. And now we get to move on to the next arc. Vonnegut is now gone. Dominic is hopefully gone. I don't want to ever see you mentioned ever again. Please go away. And now we get to deal with this tree nonsense. We're going to go fight a tree, I guess. We've run out of agents, right? Agents are beaten. Now we fight trees. I was wrestling with this idea in the last video too, about maybe doing like a Q&A for any questions that might still exist, you know, about the chapters or the videos or anything. It'd be like my excuse to make some shorts. I don't know, it might be fun. I'm just thinking about new things. But yeah, I don't know how to make outros.